Hi everyone, Reezer Gaming here. I have about 1,500 hours of experience playing Oxygen Not Included. I have a lot of fun with this game. And over the hours, over my streams, I've noticed there's a few things I'd like them to sort of add or change about Oxygen Not Included. Some features they could incorporate, changing how some of the systems work. And I just wanted to share my thoughts with you today on a few of these things. I was originally going to make a top 10 list, but I thought a couple of the entries were kind of trivial or something that could be easily done with mods. So I made it a top 7 instead. But yeah, without further ado, let's begin. So the first feature I want them to add is a really straightforward one. I've noticed it a lot on my streams. When you have a base with a large amount of duplicates, like 40 or 50, and you're printing them off fairly quickly, they'll be new to the colony, they'll get a lot of experience, they'll get a lot of skill points. And what I typically do is I notice at the start of every stream when I load up the game, I'll have like a dozen dupes that will require skill points adding. And then from there, like every 3 minutes, another dupe will unlock another skill point. And it's very tempting to just go back and constantly give the dupes these skills and interrupt whatever I'm doing, interrupt my train of thought. It's just a lot of micromanagement. And often, from the moment you print a dupe, you'll have a pretty good idea of what skills you want them to grab initially. So you shouldn't have to keep going back to the menu over and over again for each dupe late game. So I think what they should do is they should just add a queue where you can just prioritize skills to be unlocked as the dupes earn the experience for them. Like in this example here, like we have a layer who is interested in research but also has super duper hard digging unlocked. So in this case, I would probably queue up for the dupe to research or get all of the research skills first, and then go for the digging skills. So I just queue up all of these, and then the dupe would unlock all of these skills over time, and then I would just come back like once I reach the end of that queue, and then I could queue up some more things. Or it might even be the case that I have a template of how I want a certain dupe to skill up each time they come out the pod. Like maybe I want to give everyone exosuit training immediately, regardless of interests. Or I want to give all of the builders building and then supplying and then operating in that order so they can do mechatronics stuff when it's convenient. And being able to queue stuff up and being able to set templates for it would just save a lot of micromanagement and a lot of time. And it would just, I think I'd make better decisions about what skills to unlock as well, because I wouldn't just be interrupting what I was doing constantly to go and pick a random skill I don't really care about. So yeah, this is just a little quality of life feature I'd like them to add. This may be solved by mods already, but I really don't think this should be a mod. I think this should be a base game feature. Everyone should be able to do this. So yeah, that's my first item. Second one is blueprints. So being able to take a structure that you've already built and being able to copy a template of that and then put it somewhere else in the game. Or in a new run. There's already a mod that lets you blueprint stuff, and it's a feature that's in a lot of other games like Factorio, Dyson Sphere Program. But when you've already designed something and you just want to lay it out exactly how you designed it. And the difference between what I want them to add to Oxygen Not Included and what currently exists in the blueprint mod is I want to make it incorporated into the gameplay. I think it'd be a really neat way to sort of tie different colonies together between different runs. And my concept for this is to blueprint something, you'd have to build it first, and then you'd use like a special blueprinting tool to make a copy of it. And depending on how many items that you copied, like buildings, wires, tiles, etc., it would cost a certain amount of databanks to blueprint it. So you'd have to put these blueprints, you'd have to put these databanks into like a special blueprinting machine or something. And then when you did that, it would unlock the blueprint, it would get sent to a database that would be consistent between all of your saves. And then you could start a new run, and then if you built the blueprinting machine, or perhaps even just through the printing pod, you could find this blueprint that you made previously and apply it to your game. So I think this is cool in a few ways, because it gets players to think about what builds they really want to actually blueprint. What builds they actually want to copy and what ones they want to come up with themselves. on different occasions, depending on what the map looks like. They're not just going to blueprint everything right off the bat because they can, or draw out blueprints for hours before actually playing any of the game. I feel like this is a really neat way to incorporate it into the actual gameplay loop. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. So moving on from this, the third point is something I want them to rework. It's pressure damage. So I've talked about this on my stream a few times, and I find it's way too convenient and easy to make infinite material storages in this game. You have, I mean, let's just look through the examples on the screen at the moment. So in terms of solids, you can literally store any mass of solid debris on any tile by just dropping it there with either an automated dispenser or just filling a storage bin and then emptying it. It's trivial. You could have thousands of tons of material just resting on a single tile, and it doesn't matter what the tile's made of. So in this case, do you need storage bins at all? When you can just dump all the material in one tile? It's not ideal, I don't think. Similarly, with the liquid and gas reservoirs, the liquid reservoir only holds 5 tons of liquid, and it takes up a 3x2 area. So you'll actually be able to store more liquid just in a tile gap. Fill it with normal pressure water, you'll store more. And yes, you can build liquid reservoirs underwater and store more liquids that way, but it's a marginal benefit. In gas reservoirs, it's a 5x3 building and it only holds 150 kilograms of gas. And the high pressure vent lets you just pressurize rooms to 20 kilograms of tile super easily. So even if we ignore the ability to make an infinite storage for these things, the gas reservoir is only going to add like 33% to your gas storage capacity if you're just filling it into like a regular space with tiles. And you probably want to fill that space with something else, anything else. So it's really not that useful. Whereas the infinite storages are really easy to make. All you need to do is put down a liquid vent or a gas vent and trick it with a certain amount of liquid that's below the overpressure limit of the vent. And it will just push out whatever other liquid or gas you want to go out into an area to infinitely pressurize. And with gas in particular, it doesn't matter what the surrounding tiles are. They won't take pressure damage from any amount of gas pressure, even if it's tens of thousands of kilograms per tile. Liquids do inflict pressure damage on tiles based on their hardness, but you can get around this really easily with just using airflow tiles or doors, like manual or mechatronic airlocks. They don't take pressure damage at all for some reason. So you can also store an infinite amount of liquid in just a really small space. And it just trivializes the whole issue. I think it could just be really interesting from a gameplay design point of view. Like coming up with more intricate ways of storing things to get around the fact that you can't just infinitely shove stuff into a single tile. Or however much space your pumps need to operate. So, the other end of the coin is, you have bunker tiles and doors in the game from the original Oxygen Not Included. And they were relevant there because they resist meteor damage, and there were meteors in the base asteroid. But you don't find those meteors in spaced out until you get to the regolith asteroid, which is practically at the end of the game, and it's almost entirely optional. In fact, it probably is entirely optional. I haven't gone there yet. And they do technically resist pressure damage, but why would you ever use them when you can just, when gases don't pressurize things or inflict pressure damage, solids don't inflict pressure damage on things, and you can get around the issues with liquid pressure damage so easily by just using airflow tiles. So I think you can solve all of these problems in one by changing the rules for how pressure works. I mean, I'd keep liquid pressure the same as it is, make it based on hardness of the tiles surrounding the liquid, but make that also apply to airflow tiles and airlock doors. I understand the airflow tiles would have to be coded in a different way because the liquid is just repelled from them, so it doesn't flow through them. But I imagine this would be fairly easy for the devs to fix if they wanted to. And it just doesn't seem like intentional behavior, especially with how airflow tiles interact with liquids in the first place. Like, you can have airflow tiles. You can have a floor of a water tank be airflow tiles, and then the room below it, full of gas, and the gas would bubble up through the airflow tiles. The water would just hold it in place. It just feels like a bit of a dev oversight. So I would make those airflow tiles and airlock doors take normal pressure damage first. And then next, I would make it so that solid tiles start taking pressure damage after a certain amount of debris mass is stored on them. I imagine it would be quite a lot more than liquids and gases just to stay balanced. Similar to how the storage bin can hold a lot more solids than liquid reservoir and gas reservoir can hold liquids and gases. But make it some finite amount, so you can't just store every material on the map in one tile. Make it so you have to at least spread it out a little bit and sort it or something. And then, gas pressure. I don't really see any fundamental reason why this shouldn't inflict pressure damage on tiles either. In fact, I feel like it should inflict the same amount of pressure damage as liquids. It's quite a task to pressurize a gas storage room up to thousands of kilograms per tile anyways. So why shouldn't this cause damage and be an issue that people need to deal with if they leave it unchecked? So in these situations, I would make it so that you would primarily use bunker tiles or gates to deal with the pressure. Have them have much higher pressure damage thresholds like they do currently, but it's actually useful because you can't just infinitely store stuff. If you want to store a certain pressure of liquid or gas or even solids in one space, it incentivizes you to use these steel bunker tiles instead of something else. And then the last thing I would do is just buff gas reservoirs and liquid reservoirs just a little bit. Maybe make it based on material type. So if they're made of a stronger material, like I put gold amalgam on this sheet. I don't think that's really true. I just picked it basically overheat temperature. But you can make it like a certain material 2 times, and then steel could have the higher capacity because it's reinforced with steel. Like maybe make iron reservoirs 2 times instead of gold amalgam. Allow you to build them out of iron or stronger materials. And then these buildings are a bit more of a niche as well. Like they're actually able to store substantially more higher pressure liquid or gas than you would just from pressurizing a room normally. So those are the changes I'd make to this. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are, because I know this is a little bit controversial, but I just feel like it would create a more interesting problem to solve, and you'd end up with these setups where you're sorting stuff into bins, or sorting liquids into different areas without just having like it be super compact to the point where it's completely unrealistic. But so this is more of a personal bugbear than anything. Let me know what your thoughts. So the next point I have is oxygen. So it's in the name of the game. Oxygen not included. How do you include oxygen? There's a few different ways. There's the oxygen diffuser with algae. There's a rust deoxidizer, and there's the electrolyzer. But realistically, late game, you just use the electrolyzer, because you run out of algae super quickly early game, especially if you hire a lot of dupes or print a lot of dupes. They're not being paid. And rust deoxidizing is good on maps with rust, but not every map has rust, and it is again limited. Eventually, you're going to have to go into space to harvest it, and that lasts a lot longer than algae in terms of harvesting it, but it's still something you need to eventually solve. So more or less every base and every run I've seen ends up defaulting to electrolyzers, because you get water from geysers renewably, reliably early on, and you can deal with the cooling requirements and sort of just the material filtration requirements, like getting hydrogen where you want it to go, getting the oxygen where you want it to go, fairly easily. So it just stands heads and shoulders above the other oxygen sources in the game. And I feel like it should be more of an open debate late game, like which oxygen source you go for. Maybe there should be certain maps where it makes sense to primarily use rust deoxidizers instead, electrolyzing stuff. Or maybe algae should be a bit more of a renewable resource than it currently is. So one issue I have about algae is algae terrariums. I don't really understand why they're implemented in the game like they are. They're basically a slightly more efficient oxygen diffuser that doesn't require power or heat, but you need dupes to like take the polluted water out. Like they fill up with, like, you fill them with water and then you need to sort of empty them of polluted water. and then send that polluted water somewhere, or have it off-gas through deodorizers like the image I've got on screen at the moment. But essentially, it's just a side grade to the oxygen diffuser. Like, sure, it doesn't consume a huge amount of power. Well, I mean, the oxygen diffusers don't either. It doesn't consume a very small amount of power. It doesn't produce a very small amount of heat. And it pollutes a lot of water. And it's only slightly more efficient. And the crux of the issue is, there's not enough algae on the map to make the extra efficiency worth it, because you're going to run out regardless of how efficiently you're managing it. So the first thing I think I'd do is I'd add like an extra algae source, like an optional algae source that could appear on a map. And in this case, I thought of the algae sludge geyser. So what this would do is it would erupt algae sludge, which would be a new material type at 1.5 kilograms per second at 30 degrees C. So kind of like a cool salt slush vent, or a cool slush vent or whatever. Except it's 30 degrees, and it's a slush that you have to separate in a sludge press into algae and polluted water. And you wouldn't be able to boil the algae out of it, because obviously if you get it to boiling temperature, the algae would boil anyways. So it gives people a reason to use the sludge press more on maps that don't have a huge amount of polluted dirt or mud or polluted mud. And it gives you a long-term source of algae that you can feed to these terrariums or oxygen diffusers or whatever infrastructure would process it. And it just gives a bit more options. You could find a map with a load of algae, sludge geysers, and just run entirely off algae instead of electrolyzing things. And use the polluted water for something else. And then the algae terrariums themselves. I don't understand why they consume algae. I thought the whole point of an algae terrarium in real life is that you're growing algae to feed something, to feed someone, to produce oxygen with. I don't understand the logic behind having a colony growing in a pot, consuming the algae. So I would rework this building so that instead of consuming algae, it produces it. It still pollutes water, so you have to still manage the water like shown above. But it would produce algae one-to-one from carbon dioxide in the area, and the throughput would be directly proportional to the amount of light it would receive. And you need a lot of light, like more light than you need at the moment to get it to be more efficient. Like the throughput would be proportional to the amount of light, and then it would depend on having carbon dioxide in the air as well for it to eat. But it would let you turn carbon dioxide into oxygen, and it would give you a different sort of pathway. Like if you have a load of CO2 vents or geysers, you could convert that into oxygen directly with these algae terrariums. Or say you're running a load of wood burners or even ethanol production, you could turn all of that carbon dioxide into oxygen instead of feeding it through slicksters. So it just gives an extra option. It makes the problem of getting oxygen in the late game not a sort of one-way street. And the current oxygen diffuser building is really good for the early game. You just put a little bit of algae in it. It generates a fairly large amount of oxygen. I think if we were going to scale up algae production in the game, you'd want to make like a slightly bigger building. You could make that more efficient than the current oxygen diffuser, like as efficient as the algae terrariums in the current game are. But make it produce at a higher temperature, require more power to operate, make it a bit more tricky to use for the extra efficiency. And then that gives like a late game solution that makes efficient use of the resource, but is a bit more challenging to handle than the base oxygen diffuser. We could even add a critter that converts algae into oxygen. Like maybe it's some kind of rare like Pacu variant or something that farts up little bubbles of oxygen. I don't know. But it would give an alternative to building oxygen diffusers, and it just gives you another pathway. It gives you more options for generating this resource that's like the most important thing in the game, that's in the title of the game. And rusty oxidizers, I think they're mostly alright. Like, if you have rust on a map, it makes sense to build them, and the rust will last for a while, and eventually you can get more from space, so I'm mostly okay with it. But one thing I would change about them is allow you to convert refined iron into rust by putting it in a room with like a really high oxygen pressure or something. Like only debris. You wouldn't want your iron buildings or wires rusting or whatever. And then this would consume oxygen in the process, but then you'd be able to get the oxygen back by deoxidizing it. and this would provide a pathway for converting refined metal into metal ore, which you need occasionally, and there is no renewable source of. So I think that would give the rusty oxidizer another niche, and it would make it something that you could build on every map, so long as you have like iron, or the ability to get iron. And there always will be iron, because it will come from iron volcanoes on the frozen asteroid in space now. So I think that would be enough to bring it in line with electrolyzers as a late game option. But yeah, those are my thoughts on just diversifying late game oxygen production. Yeah, let me know what you think. So moving on from that, this is a bit of a pet idea I've had for a while. Basically, there's a load of materials in the game that are really hard to make and don't really have any benefit, like say freezing naphtha into a solid, or like boiling rock into rock gas with some kind of crazy boiler, or just liquid sucrose at like 250 degrees or whatever, or 200 degrees, I think. So you can make all of these things in the game, but there's no reason to. So what I think would be really good is if they added, maybe as a story trait or something, like somewhere in the distant reaches of the star map, they could add like some kind of robot merchant, and once you go discover them, they give you like limited time quests where you'd have to send a rocket back with like a decent amount of a very specific material like this, and they'd have a few different quests on at a time. And if you manage to fulfill the requirements for a quest before it expires, like they give you a certain amount of shop currency, and then you could exchange that for goodies. Like you could exchange it for, I don't know, like unique artifacts that give your dupes bonuses when they're near them, or just small quantities of advanced manufactured resources like insulation or thermium or something. Just, I don't know exactly what the reward would be, but it'd be something unique and something just interesting that would give people a reason to sort of make really like unusual builds just to make these things. I think it'd be really cool. Like there could be an achievement tied to like doing a certain number of quests for this guy. It could be like an imperative or something. But yeah, I think that'd be a really cool system that they could add to the game, and just give players more things to do. Just let them go crazy. And I'm not sure entirely what it would look like. Maybe it'd be like some kind of space station or something, and you'd find like some kind of eccentric dupe there. I don't think they want aliens in the game. All the critters in the game are genetically modified, so it wouldn't be an alien, it wouldn't fit the lore, but just something out in space to both reward rocketry more and reward just being able to make random things. So yeah, this is just my little concept of something I'd like them to add. So here's something else I was thinking about with refinement. Refining products into end products is quite a one-way process in this game. Like you'll start with a raw resource and you'll convert it into something that has an end use, like plastic, steel, or something. But there are circumstances where you might have an abundance of that through another source, and you want to convert it back into raw materials. So I'd love if they added more buildings in the game that would let you do this. So I've got a few examples here, like a fuel cell that would just combine hydrogen and oxygen back into water, like in an electric car, generating a little bit of power. It would basically be a reverse electrolyzer, but you might have a situation where you have a decent amount of hydrogen production, like from vents or Saturn critter traps, and you might have too much oxygen as well. Like if you've got like a load of oxygen sources, or you just don't have a load of duplicates. So being able to convert that back into water to feed plants could be an interesting pathway. It would just let you try out some more interesting things. Another idea is sort of cracking petroleum into hydrogen and coal to give you like a larger throughput source of hydrogen, if you wanted to. And it also gives you a way to get coal from petroleum, which you might want for turning into diamond for drill cones for rockets. And I imagine you probably do this oil cracking via rad bolts. I was mostly kind of thinking of X-ray cracking from Dyson Sphere program. I had a quick look on Wikipedia. It seems like somewhat sound illogic, and it would add another use for radiation. But I think being able to produce large volumes of hydrogen from the petroleum, like at a better ratio than from electrolyzer water would be interesting. And then natural gas production. It would be cool if there was a way for you to industrially produce natural gas that wasn't just that. I mean, obviously sour gas boilers exist. That's very true. But perhaps something, a slightly different pathway than that. Like, I'm imagining some kind of synthetic gas production machine that will turn carbon dioxide and hydrogen into natural gas and water. Like, you need a lot of hydrogen to do it, but it would produce natural gas. And it wouldn't be power positive, but it would let you produce water as well. You know, consume the CO2. I think it could be an interesting pathway to go through. Just if you wanted some more natural gas for your stove or something. For your gas range. And then, something I think they should definitely add to the game is just being able to remineralize water. You might have a situation where you want to grow water weeds or something that involves salt water or brine. But you don't have any saltwater geysers. You just have a load of water and a load of salt on the map. Just having the option of being able to convert that back into salt water, I think would be pretty neat. And this last one was inspired by Surviving Mars. Like a solid oxide electrolyzer. Like, I could take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and turn it into oxygen somewhat directly. And in this case, it would use carbon dioxide and ceramic, and it would turn it into oxygen and then graphite, so you could refine that graphite to get lime. And it would be a way to produce graphite. But I imagine to balance this building, you'd probably want to give it like quite a high power cost, quite a low throughput. Because just being able to get rid of all the carbon dioxide and turn it straight to oxygen, this would be a powerful building, but it could be like a late game option that requires, maybe it would require radiation, I don't know. But it just gives you more ways of sort of like taking the one-way processes that are currently in the game and sort of making a more complex network of interactions between the materials. Like the sour gas boiling pathway is really interesting in the game, but that's like there's relatively few examples of that sort of thing. Like trees turning them into ethanol and processing all of that with pips. That's another sort of pathway that leads to an interesting sort of flowchart of resource dynamics. But the more of these sorts of multi-directional pathways that can add to the game, the more interesting sort of industrial loops you're going to get. And I think it would really add some depth to the game. But these are just some ideas I had. There might be better ways of doing this. So again, let me know if you have any thoughts. And then the last item, this is a bit of a personal request as well. I just wanted to add lithium to the game. It's a really cool metal. It's an alkali metal. It's really low on the periodic table compared to all the other metals. It's still a metal. It melts at very low temperatures. It melts at 180 degrees C and it boils at 1,330. But the interesting thing about the metal is it has a really high specific heat capacity. It's 3.5 BTUs per gram per C. That's almost as high as water. So you could use lithium to make tiles or temperature plates or buildings that have the conductive properties of refined metal, but actually has a really high heat capacity. But at the same time, you'd have to make sure they don't melt or overheat. So I think it'd be just a really interesting metal to add to the game. I'm not sure how you'd find it. I don't think you'd find it from a volcano, because at those sorts of temperatures, it would just gasify. Like why we don't have lead volcanoes in the game. So I imagine you'd probably just find it in ore form. You'd have to process it. Maybe they'd add it to space. Maybe they'd add it to some kind of like special sort of underwater biome. I was kind of thinking of Subnautica when I thought of this as well. Like, you can find lithium in the game and it has a lot of uses, like reinforcing structures, like heat resistant stuff, that sort of thing. So yeah, ideas I had, other than high heat capacity metal tiles and temperature plates. You could use it to make advanced sort of lithium ion batteries that could be better than normal batteries but require this specific material. You could use it to make reinforced glass that can better withstand pressure. Maybe you combine this with the pressure changes to gas pressure damage, solid pressure damage that I was talking about earlier, and they'll give it a bit of a niche in certain cases. I know there's air purification techniques that use lithium and that could extract carbon dioxide from the air and turn it into regolith, and then that lets you turn carbon dioxide into a filtration medium, which would be balanced by the fact that lithium is available in relatively limited quantities. And then You could also combine it with aluminium to form sort of better solid oxide rocket fuel. You could even like sort of refine it into enriched lithium and use it for like fusion reactors or something, but that's like a whole other kettle of fish. I'm not sure I'm suggesting that they add fusion reactors to the game, because that would probably just, like, if you could build one, it would probably just trivialize a lot of the other things you could do. But I don't know, maybe. It's certainly possible. But yeah, that was sort of my list of things I wanted to sort of add or change in the game. It's just a very personal list. I just thought you might find it amusing. Here are my thoughts. I usually talk about this sort of stuff on my Twitch stream anyways when I'm playing. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. I'm gonna head off to play some ONI now. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you soon. Play Mondays to Fridays, 7 to 11 GMT. We're currently doing our Badlands run where we have just stupid amounts of iron, and it's a lot of fun. And yeah, this will go up on YouTube. I've got loads of other discussion videos on here, and I just uploaded the meme recently as well. So yeah, thanks for watching, and from the fish and the frogs, we'll see you soon, hopefully. Bye for now.